I've never done a video about A.C. Grayling before, so here's a debate he did with Matthew Chapman against David Wolpe and Dinesh D'Souza. This debate is about whether religion, on the whole, is a good thing. Here's one reason why it might not be.
And so they tend to be very traditionalist, very conservative and rather retrogressive, and that explains a great deal of the social policy and political endeavour that the religions engage in.
The oldest religions lock many of their adherents into the moral systems of the Bronze Age or earlier. Once we view morality as dictated by a perfect, all-powerful God, it doesn't matter how much suffering we discover it causes, it is still obligatory. The difference between theistic morality and humanist morality is that humanist morality makes reducing human suffering a priority, while theistic morality views reducing human suffering as of secondary importance if it is of any importance at all. Murder is not wrong primarily because of the suffering it causes. According to theistic morality, it is wrong because a god doesn't approve of it. The suffering it causes is an afterthought if it has any relevance at all.
That's one thing that they tend to have in common with one another. But another thing they have in common with one another, and it's a very important point this, is that they share a structural feature. In fact, the religions are paradigmatic of a certain kind of organization, what I call a monolithic ideology. A one-size-fits-all, top-down, totalizing ideology, which says, we've got the right story, and you've got to sign up for it. And if you don't sign up for our story, if you don't agree, you're going to pay a sanction of one kind or another. And during the course of history, those sanctions have sometimes been very terrible. It's in this respect in which religions in history and in their orthodox manifestations now, not in all their manifestations, tend to share with other kinds of totalizing ideologies. So that's why it's no great surprise that Joseph Stalin, for example, was educated in a seminary. What those totalitarianisms share is very, very common. Torquemada's Inquisition in Spain in the 15th century and Stalin's Soviet Union in the 20th century say the same thing. We've got the answer, you've got to agree, and if you don't, you're in trouble.
Conservatives sometimes argue that the brutality of Stalinism is due to moral relativism, but the opposite is true. In the Soviet Union, anyone who asserted that Stalin's dictates were not objectively correct, but rather his mere subjective opinion, would have been sent to the Gulag or worse. A community that permits all moral ideas to be challenged and questioned can only become tyrannical after some ideas are sanctified and no longer up for debate. Ideally, all ideas are up for debate, even the idea that it is ideal for all ideas to be up for debate.
Mother Teresa was once tending to the wounds of a leper in Calcutta and wiping the suppurating wounds from this sick and dying person. And a journalist who'd been following her around for several days said to her, "I wouldn't do that for $1 million." And without looking up, she said, "Neither would I."
Really? Because she wasn't shy about asking for or taking millions of dollars from people, and nobody really knows what even happened to that money. It wasn't evidently spent on the poor. Supporters of Mother Teresa say, she worked in horrible, disgusting conditions. How dare you criticize her when you would never put yourself through that? I certainly wouldn't have put myself through that if I had the millions of dollars Mother Teresa had. I would have put that money into building sanitary, well-equipped hospitals for the poor, rather than allowing people to die in filth like she did.
But does religion make us behave better? To partially answer that question, let me read you a verse or two from the Bible. Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 11 and 12. When men strive together one with another, and the wife of the one draweth near for to deliver her husband out of the hand of him that smiteth him, and putteth forth her hand, and taketh him by the secrets, then shalt thou cut off her hand. Roughly translated, this means that if you're in a fight and your wife tries to help you by grabbing your opponent's balls, you should chop her hand off. It's there. I mean, I can show you. I know it's kind of cheap to poke fun at the Bible because it's so easy, but there is a serious point here, which is that far from making us behave better, religion often complicates and distorts morality. By any reasonable standards, hacking bits off your wife is far worse than her squeezing your enemy's nuts.
Not only is this passage a weirdly specific prescription, proper wrestling technique isn't typically the preoccupation of religious morality, it also prescribes a very draconian punishment. It's not even clear that this is consistent with the Old Testament principle of an eye for an eye. Unless your wife pulls the guy's nuts clean off, why should she have to lose any body parts?
Evidence infuriates them, as does science itself. And this antipathy to science has slowed down stem cell research, continues to harm the health of women and girls, and contributes to cynicism about scientific issues like global warming.
Science has been held back everywhere and continues to be held back in some places because of religion. And religion has often been wary of modern medicine. Far too often do we hear about parents who allowed their children to die of easily treatable illnesses because they preferred to pray for their recovery rather than take them to a hospital.
I grew up next to my gay uncle and his partner. When I was 9, I discovered they faced long prison sentences if their homosexuality was revealed. This was justified by Leviticus 20:13, and the verse was often quoted by both politicians and the clergy. If a man lieth with a man as he lieth with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination, they shall surely be put to death. This barbaric verse is still used by Christians, including Catholics and evangelicals, and violence is only its most obvious consequence.
It's hard to imagine how you could justify the persecution of gay folks without religion.